So in my half an hour there before, I was thinking, well, what am I going to talk about this evening? I decided I would try writing a poem. It usually takes me a long, long time. So be patient with this, but it's called Beginning. Today, a day to start, trying not to rush to oblivion, but dangle on some small ledge, entangled in the ferociousness of waiting. It is an angry sea of things denied and undone, the hope that redemption only moments away. Some possibility that the infinite close at hand. Relaxing in some small place where the grief and the dark waters of life's repetitions subside. Some small presence arises from the moments of a burnt past. I knew we came to fight with the guardians of the good, breaking open this tiny, tiny breath, some small place to be touched, life giving itself back to itself. So I think just starting this retreat, one of the pieces I would like to start with is the truth of this word faith, sometimes referred to as confidence. But we always have to step into things that cannot be known by us. A bit impossible. You know, it's always going to be a bit impossible. But at the same time, there's this capacity to, first, there is the possibility of a thing called discernment, something that is, in a sense, first, out of sheer the complexity of life, we sort of make mistake after mistake. You know, that's sort of life in some ways. And what comes along is the possibility that there is a path where at least there's a little less. You know. And we take some sense of confidence or faith that that path holds some knowable or some truth or something verifiable for us. But we can't know it. Problem. We can't know it. So the practice simply begins with this sort of taking a step into what can't be known. There's always a bit of apprehension or fear, or, you know, is this the right place, the right time, right person, right situation? You can't know that. What you can know is that there is the possibility of having a particular relationship to what's happening, what's occurring. And that, in many ways, is something that we originally sort of train ourselves in. And it comes from our psychology, from our early histories. And we go around working with things denied and undone. With some kind of hope, some kind of redemption that may be moments away or at hand in some way. But somewhere there's a kind of deeper intelligence that if we make enough mistakes and there's enough I guess I could say, I didn't want to jump into this right away, but it's really karmic influences that draw us towards the center of kind of our, not just our own understanding, but that there is a collective understanding that has been passed down through the ages that is available. Sometimes we seek it, other times it simply appears to us due to causes and conditions or circumstances in our life. It can be a book or a person or traveling or, some experience that demands that we look for or seek or begin to recognize that there's a possibility of truth, a possibility of moving out of the habits and the conditions that we're entrapped in some way. So we come to this practice. We have to start with some kind of faith. And I think the beginning is always blind. And then at some point there has to be some understanding that we can't just dance on the surface of things, but we have to actually stop and somewhere trust something that's going to allow us to look at, drop below the habits and the conditions that hold us in our psychology, in our strategies from our wounding, and from our constant need to find comfort and some sense of, a quick safety. So we have to take some risks. And the first risk is to suspend our views. We have created all this ways of understanding the world that in many ways have just confined us and kept us somehow locked in these identities. And the practice is always coming, saying, first, I know from that manufactured identity that it's limited. It only depends on its wounds and its old habits and its places of comfort and its belief in a certain type of safety. So we come, there has to be the blind faith, and then there has to be really this process of what they simply talk about is the perfection of view. But it has to start by seeing that we have created one. And it is not necessarily true. So to suspend it, we first have to create some way of I could say, to bypass it, but it's not to bypass it. It's actually to get under it. And to get under it takes a specific known path or journey, which simply starts with the fact that we have to come and sit down and in essence, kind of renounce the options. Now, one word is renounce the options. The other one, actually, you could say, is a word I like, which is to simplify. Come to a world where we simplify. And to simplify means that we actually cut off options. We cut off a certain series of types of choices and limit them. And it's really all retreat is, it's limiting choices. And then you could sit in just kind of resistance and impatience if there was nothing else that was given to you. But fortunately, the path itself is based on our capacity to retrain the mind. The thing is, it stays with the simple. So we're not giving it some complex mathematical, philosophical, psychological way to figure the universe out. Instead, we're taking away. We're taking that away. And we give it the simplest thing. We simply call it placement practice. You're placing the mind on an object. That you cannot figure out. It's not something to figure out. That's why they call it placement. It's just placing the mind on something that's available and true and simple. Okay? That was all that's asked. So it's placing the mind on an object. It's continuously placing a mind on an object. It's placing the mind close to the object. It is taming the mind on the object. It is pacifying the mind on the object. When the practice, in the sense of training or taming the mind, ultimately it is, they use the language of placing it evenly. It means there's absolutely no effort. It no longer even needs an object to be placed on. It's simply the mind is at rest. But they talk about it as there are 9 stages. You know, there's a picture over there on the wall, a tanka, which they say is the journey of taming the mind, where it's that of a rogue elephant, you know, and it has to go through this journey, this process, to arrive at a place where it is placed evenly. So it's a journey that we are undertaking. It is not the objective here. It is simply a training. And the training, its purpose is not just to get to a place where there is no struggle with the mind or the object, or the object, non-object. We actually have to use the mind then, to study the mind. And that is, first of all, goes back to the it is an angry sea of things denied and undone. No. So there has to be a way of turning the mind towards the waves of our stories and our past, and our longings, and our contractions, and our moments of openness, so that we actually are studying it very closely. The idea is not to come to conclusions. It's actually simply to study it. You know, too many mistakes are made about conclusions. And the practice itself is not based on conclusions. It's based on the quality of a mind that keeps that sense of investigation, saying, I don't actually know for sure what it is. No. And therefore, I have not a fixed relationship with what's happening right now, but I actually have a mutable, movable connection. That is being informed all the time. So you're not stopping or blocking it or holding it in any way. You're investigating. And that investigation, first of all, is recognizing the kind of our ideas about things, our, sometimes the rigidity of our values and our past attachments and our projections and judgments and criticism of things. It's going to be there. But the practice isn't about that. The practice is about this capacity, they talk about it as insight. And insight is based on, I like the word intuitive insight, where it's actually based on, not on a knowing or thinking, but on a capacity to not confine it, not to hold it in the smallness of your mind, right? Not from your mind. It may be bigger, much bigger than that. So you have to sit, and your first instinct is, you know what's right. I am right, aren't I? Isn't that what happens? No? That's what we do, And it's not to say that that's good or bad. It just says that's what I do. And then there's a thing called insight. That actually, the first is an initial reaction which comes from a habit of mind, from something that is created from the past and has been built in a constructive fashion, but ain't necessarily so. And I'm not saying it's not right. I'm saying the practice, the insight practice says, don't stop there. There may be more to this than you can imagine. And so at that point you have to then allow, I like this word, openness. Can you, at that point, open? And instead of knowing and, there's kind of this whole process where when we're presented with a situation, we jump up into our thinking, up into how it is and what we think. Instead of, the insight is actually intuitive. It means that you have to ask the question. Actually, the question is to drop down below the initial it's a kind of figuring out, or again, it's not that it's not right, it's just what this does is just to go below it. And there may be something else happening just below it. So the mind is training itself here. First of all, to settle itself, to come to a place where the waters are a little calmer. And then there's this insight, this capacity to train the mind. Repetitively, over and over again, to drop down. To give up the story. To give up any kind of knowing whatsoever. So it's maybe more about, maybe the word, I was thinking about the gut. We have to go to the gut. And it's not saying that you're abandoning the mind and its knowing. It simply says you have to reverse the direction. Because the instinct is to go up. The training is to go down. In some ways it's a little scary to go down because it no longer holds the conventional relative kind of mores of the system or the way it should be or was. And there's more of meeting the world. But it's not meeting something to construct a new story about or with. It's not about that. It's actually to deconstruct what is being seen and heard and smelled and tasted and thought, felt. Actually to deconstruct that. So to deconstruct it means that somehow there are two kind of worlds being played here. One of them says that what you see, what you think, what, is, this is what is true now. What it appears to be. So there is kind of the form itself and being able to say, okay, this is, and it has certain laws that govern it. When you don't understand the laws, it gets pretty crazy. But they're not fixed laws. They're just laws. Why? Because you have also on the other side the deconstruction of it. And the deconstruction says that somehow what you're looking at, as solid and as real as it may appear, if you deconstruct it, you take it down into its bare parts, it's no longer what it appears to be. It cannot be what it appears to be. No. It is simply how the mind has constructed the world. You know, it's interesting, the language itself is just a what? A collective construction of agreed upon collective conditioning. You know. So it's close, maybe sometimes. It's close. But it's not it. It's more than a moment. It's possibly thousands of moments away from it. And what we're trying to get to here is insight. Insight into the truth of the matter here. And so the insight, when it comes from, instead of going up, but going down into the body, down into kind of this intuitive knowing, it can't be what it appears to be. Okay? It can't be what it appears to be. No. Why? Because as the mind constructs it, it's only constructing something that's already changed. Look at consciousness. Look at how your mind works. Constructs something, and a moment later, the mind jumps to a sensation in the body, or to another thought, or to something else. It's not what it appears to be. So, we're trying to break the mythology of how we touch things, how we see things, how we name them, construct them, identify them from some past conditioning. So what are we doing then? We're kind of breaking things down that way. We're going below the language. We're going below the our need to feel safe, constructed. So I'll change directions here a little bit. Spiritual path. It's not to make you something more known and safe. Okay? That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're kind of pulling on the edges of how we've constructed ourselves. And questioning the way we actually constructed. So we're actually into high risk here. Because instead of making the world a safer place, it's actually making the world a much wilder place. You know? It's not constructed in the immediacy of things, but actually the trying not to rush to oblivion, but dangle on some small ledge, entangled in the ferocity of waiting. Entangled in the ferocity of waiting. So I can't answer it. No. I'm not supposed to answer it. What I'm supposed to do is ask you to question how you see, how you hear, how you smell, how you taste, how you think, how you feel. How did you construct this identity? You did such a great job. You know? And what has it really brought you? You know? What has it really brought you? And here, the whole practice of insight is saying, is it actually even real? You know? Is it actually real? Or is it a conventional, hypothesis that you constructed to feel safe? They use this word because when you talk about the fixed thing itself. And I've been messing with this for a little while now. It's almost daunting to me to even try to approach it. But, the relative world, name and form, it's just what it is. And yet the whole practice of the deconstruction process of breaking down the identity says that what I'm looking at and what I'm experiencing, what the consciousness itself that experiences it, that somehow whatever you're hearing or noticing or feeling or tasting, it has no core, there's nothing solid here. And the Buddha simply exemplified it as he used the word anatta. It's constructed as, we built a self, he's saying, oh, there ain't a self. And it's not something you can, I can talk about it, but it's not something that can be refuted, actually, in the relative world. The relative world is, the suchness of things. It is what it is. But the practice itself says, I'm breaking it all down to its fundamental components, and there is none. So, in so many Buddhist terms, they use the word emptiness. It's kind of this cognizant emptiness that we know that when we break it down, there's no core to it, there's no solidness. It's simply the flux of movement that is actually being experienced, and somehow I make myself up in that flux. You know, the Johnness or Maryness or thread of the construction. You know, that too is just a construction. But I don't like the word emptiness particularly. I think in some ways that it, in our language, in our kind of etymological construct, that it sort of has a nihilistic view to it, you know, nihilism. Buddha didn't mean it that way at all. You know. So maybe what I've been using lately is this terminology, potential. That actually nothing is what it appears to be, but it has the potential for everything. So we're always looking, even though in the relative world, what you look at is something, but actually in its reality, it is just the potential of everything. No, that's all it is. It's the potential of everything. And our practice here is actually the capacity to not to deny the suchness of this, the relative world as we experience it. But it's not to buy it either. You know? And we have to put more emphasis on not buying it because we're so bought in. Right? So the whole practice of coming here is the deconstruction process so that we began to see that everything is just a potential. No. And if it's just a potential, then it's okay. You know, you can let go. No problem. You know, there's nothing, there's no problem here. You know? The dark and the light, you know, love and hate, fear and the absence of fear, you know, it's all plays in the world. There's two specific kind of mind pieces here that I hold, and one is the world of renunciation. It means I say no to it because I know that ultimately by saying no to it, that there's no harm. There's a kind of a harmlessness completely in the renunciation of it. Yeah. The other one is can I skillfully burn and be burned up? Maybe somewhat more of a, you could say more of a tantric path in that way, but I think all householders are somehow involved in that on a level. And to deny that and say, oh, it's only this, no, we have to see the honoring of the part that allows us to pull away and renounce. And at the same time, how the friction happens, which happens to be, I think sometimes about love and fear. You're afraid you may deny. But if you love, you'll probably burn. Oh heavens, what to do? And you're choosing this all the time. You know. So it's not about right and wrong, it's about this capacity to listen deeply enough to know what's of value to be burned up for. You know, what part of your identity, what part of your grasping, what part of your protectiveness, you know, has to be burned. And you know the price will be high. Right away. But love kind of works that way. You know, has a high price tag on it. You know, fear has the same price tag. You know. So we come here. We allow ourselves to for the waves of the mind and the heart and the restlessness and fidgetiness of the body to settle. And then we sort of sit on the edge, wait. You know, sometimes it's just the breath. Sometimes it's, you know, some loud, great, you know, inexplicable hollering of the body. Some longing or confusion in the heart, you know, that just grabs and holds. Or some long-winded chit-chat. That you play over and over and over and over. So sometimes we don't even know what's going on here. It appears that nothing is happening. But the mind trains itself to listen to the heart. You know, it either tires itself out listening to stories, or it lets itself feel the heart until it heals the heart. The body just, even in its discomfort. You get to know it's your best friend. It's one thing, you know, your breath. It'll never leave you. No. Not till the end. No. People will come and go, things will come and go. But guess what? It's your best friend. So we get to know it really well. So, just some rambling for this evening. Beginning today, a day to start, trying not to rush to oblivion, but dangle on some small ledge, entangled in the ferocity of waiting. Is it an angry sea of things denied and undone? The hope that redemption only moments away? Some possibility that the infinite close at hand? Relaxing in some small place where the grief and the dark waters of lives, repetitions, of life's repetitions subside. Some small presence arises from the moments of a burnt past. I knew we came to fight with the guardians of good, breaking open this tiny of tiny breaths, life giving itself back to itself. Life giving itself back to itself. Just sit for a moment.